Well, good evening, everyone, at Renew Church, to the life groups. This is Peter Cavanna, and it's my joy to spend another couple of Wednesdays with you to talk about a special subject, the subject of empathy, that I've called the Comforters. And our reading is from Job 2, verses 11, 12, and 13. So you might want to grab a Bible and let's read that little piece of the Bible together now. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, when they heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, that's Job, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. Verse 12, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. I want to talk in this short series on the theme of empathy. I'm going to break this down into 5 elements. We'll look at 2 tonight and 3 next time. So, first of all, attributes of empathy. Number 1, empathy is peaceful. Peaceful. Let's read Job 2 and verse 13 again. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. That's an amazing piece of the Bible. When they saw, who knows what they had discussed on their way to Job's home. But as they got nearer to Job, and we don't know what they had planned to say when they arrived. Have you ever done that? Gone to visit someone and you know that it's going to be difficult to know what to say, and so maybe you plan a bit of the script before you arrive or before you make that phone call, whatever. But here, as they got nearer to the man who was suffering so much, it says they, for 7 days and nights, they didn't say a word to him. Now, if you know the book of Job at all, you'll know that that's not how the story ends. In fact, the book of Job is sort of about, many things, but one of them is the fact that these men don't shut up. So although they begin by being quiet, they eventually go on to start talking on. And in the end, God has to rebuke them. The last chapter says that they had not spoken appropriately. That's what God says about them. But here we find maybe they get it right initially, which is that empathy is peaceful. Empathy does not load burdens on people. Empathy comes and sits in the dirt with those who are struggling. We read that they tore their clothes, and I imagine these men to be sages, maybe well off, would have dressed well. They tore their clothes and they sit on the ground with Job. There's no rug, there's no carpet that we can read of. They sit in the dirt with him. One of the attributes of empathy is that we don't have to say all that much, if at times anything at all. Look, let me share a secret with you. One of the things about Christians is this, that they believe that they have the answers to many of life's burning issues. They are full of wisdom, spiritual and practical. That's a great thing to say about a Christian, and it's true. But sometimes one of the worst things about a Christian is this. You ready? Exactly the same thing. That they believe that they have the answers to many of life's issues, problems, and questions. And sometimes the danger is when someone is struggling, when someone is at rock bottom, and that's what's happening in this story, the danger is that a Christian might feel that they have to have answers, theologies, prophecies, predictions, clever verses, memorized psalms, I don't know, all sorts of things. Now, listen, let's be clear. Of course, there are times when we can minister to one another like that. Open up the word of God to one another, impart wisdom to one another, often through conversations, build one another up. But I think we can probably all agree that there are times when all we want to know is that people are there for us, not that they've got anything clever to say. Sometimes, rather than offering to pray for someone, perhaps we should just be the answer to their prayer, which might mean simply being with that person. And as we saw, when they realized how much he was struggling, they didn't speak at all. If you've really struggled in your life, been through a season of struggling, and someone's given you loads of advice, there's a good chance, isn't there, that they didn't really understand how rock bottom you were. And we mustn't make the same mistake. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those memes or slogans online. A wise man once said, and then it gives you some wise thing. Well, here is tonight's meme. Are you ready to write it down, post it on the internet, get it on Twitter? Here we go. A wise man once said, nothing. Sometimes the wisest thing to do is to keep our mouths shut. Now, that doesn't mean we don't show up, but it might mean that we show up and shut up. Okay? A wise man once said nothing at all. You say it best when you say nothing at all. One of the problems with thinking that we are oracles of wisdom, Bible machines, advice distributors, is we can do harm to the person that we're trying to help. And maybe we're well-intentioned. But another problem is this. Listen carefully now. If we think that by showing up and helping someone when they're at rock bottom, that we have to have lots of clever things to say, here's a danger. We might not show up at all. We might say, look, how can I go and help? How can I phone X, Y, or Z? How can I go round to so-and-so's home? How can I have any contact with so-and-so when I haven't got a clue what to say to them? when someone's diagnosed with cancer, when someone's family member dies, when someone begins to go through mental illness, redundancy, bankruptcy, all manner of health issues. The danger is we think, well, I haven't got anything clever to say. Send the pastor round. But in fact, we don't have to have anything clever to say. We just have to do what these men did and go and sit in the dirt. A story that I'm not really proud to tell you. When I was in my very early 20s, a friend of mine, this exact thing happened to me. A friend of mine went through a tragedy. I think he was in his late teens and I was in my early 20s, something like that. And because I didn't know what to say to him, I didn't have anything clever that I could say or felt that I could say, I avoided him. Yeah, I tried not to talk to him. I certainly didn't phone him. And I would even sit in a different part of the church to him. It wasn't that I didn't care. It's just that I felt like an idiot. What am I going to say? And by the way, let me tell you, I'm ashamed of this now. I avoided him to make myself feel better, maybe. I want to encourage us not to do that. Sometimes just knowing that people are there is really all that we need, isn't it? I remember when my mum passed away, and I just had all these wonderful cards. I was the pastor, so lots of people knew me, and so I got lots of cards, and they just comforted me. I can't explain how comforted I was. It felt like these people were sitting with me in my dust, in my dirt. And I didn't really read the cards. I saw who they were from initially, probably, and then just stuck them on the shelf. Didn't read. People had written all sorts of things that I didn't really read. But in fact, it didn't matter, because the power of their comfort was with me. In fact, I so remember that after they'd been up all these months, and after about 6 months, I felt sort of up to reading them, and the sun had been shining in and removed a lot of the handwriting. All the ink had gone from many of the cards. I couldn't actually read them. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the people were with me. It was a wonderful experience in so many ways. So I want to encourage you that empathy is peaceful. It doesn't try to solve problems. It just seeks to help, to come alongside. The second thing empathy is, I want to suggest to you, is that it is purposeful. Let's quickly look at the text again. Job 2 and verse 11 says this: when Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad and Zophar, when they heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, look at this, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and to comfort him. Job's 3 friends didn't accidentally bump into him in Asda. They planned to go and help him. And as we finish this evening, let me just add that while empathy is peaceful, it can also, and perhaps should be, purposeful as well. It should be something we do on purpose. It should be part of our DNA as Christians, that we want to help people. Now, sometimes that's quite sacrificial. It's difficult. It's awkward at times to be with people when we don't know what to say to them. And we might be busy. But this is all part of the sacrificial love of God. This is how we know what love is. 1 John 3:16 says, Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and so we should lay down our lives for one another. There's a couple of other verses I want to bring to your attention. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 13 and verse 3, it says this: continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. So in the early church, there's definitely a sense of the ministry of empathy, to think of others as if we were in their very shoes. Galatians, and this is a key verse I want to leave you with, chapter 6 and verse 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Now let's have a think about this. Carry each other's burdens. Well, that sounds like a little bit of work. That sounds like a little bit of sacrifice. That's why it might need to be on purpose. We might not always feel like this, but it should be part of our character in the Spirit, in the Holy Spirit, to be like Jesus. And let me finish by just saying this. We are to carry one another's burdens. We are not to add to their burdens. You showing up to help someone shouldn't be a burden to them. In fact, it should be easing the load, which is why we don't want to show up with a whole load of advice and a whole load of things for them to do. No, most likely they are the drained battery, and you and me, we're supposed to be the charge. We're supposed to be that which boosts them, powers them up, not drains them out. So empathy, peaceful and purposeful. May the Lord bless you as you pray, discuss and think about these things.